Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're making a modern tank top. For this tank, we're doing an eye-catching design that draws you in, simple band, and slightly wider body that's both flattering and comfy. Speaking of, if you're looking for your next comfy make, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the comfiest modern crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 415 grams of yarn. That's 930 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us a movie or TV quote you quote daily. My top one is, "You nasty." Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook, and it's going to start off the same for every size, no matter what size we're making, so we're all going to start with a chain 1. Now that we have our chain 1, we're going to block off that chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. That's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the first chain that we made, we're all going to insert with 11 half double crochets. So yarn over into that first chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. That's our first half double crochet. Let's do another one. Yarn over, same first chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Continue till we have a total of 11. Now that our row 1 is complete, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into our middle stitch, which is the 6th stitch for everyone. So go ahead and insert your stitch marker into there. Now we're going to get started on our following row, which is a back loop slip stitch row. So chain 1 and flip. From here, start by finding that last stitch from our previous row and insert in through that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, then yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over and gently pull through everything, and continue this, making our way all the way down. We should all have 11 stitches at the end of this row as well, since we aren't doing any increases or decreases. Now once we reach our middle stitch, we want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that middle stitch. So insert with our stitch marker. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Our row 2 is now complete. Now let's get started on our row 3. So it's going to be another back loop half double crochet row, so chain 2 and flip. Now along the outer edges, we're always going to do an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So yarn over into that first stitch, insert with 1 back loop half double, same first stitch with a second back loop half double, same first stitch with a third back loop half double. Then from here, 1 back loop half double into every stitch until we have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way down with our back loop half doubles. We should have all left 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker. Now what we're all going to do is into that stitch before our middle stitch is an increase of 2. So into that stitch with 1 back loop half double, same stitch with a second back loop half double, then into that middle stitch, which is our stitch marker stitch, 5 back loop half doubles. So take that out for now. Then we're going to insert into that middle stitch with 1, with 2, with 3, with 4, and with 5, and we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that third stitch that we did, because that is our middle stitch. So here's 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and insert your stitch marker back into that stitch. Now that we're done with our increase of 5, because we did our increase of 2 right before there, into that following stitch, we're going to mirror that and do an increase of 2 into that next stitch. So 1, 2, into that following stitch that's right next to our increase of 5. Then one back loop half double into every stitch, leaving that last one so we can do our increase of 3 together. So we've made our way down, leaving that last stitch. Into that last stitch, an increase of 3. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. We have just completed our row 3. Now just to make sure, everyone should have a total of 21 stitches, and our following row is going to be another back loop slip stitch row, so no increases and no decreases. We're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making sure we're inserting our stitch marker into our middle stitch. We are back and everyone's row 4 is now complete. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, so let's just do the next 2 rows together once more to make sure we all have it down. So chain 2 and flip. Starting into that first stitch, an increase of 3 back loop half doubles, so there's 1. Same first stitch with 2, same first stitch with our third back loop half double. Then from here, 1 back loop half double into every stitch until we have 1 stitch left right before our stitch marker stitch. Now that we have 1 stitch left right before our middle stitch, we're going to do an increase of 2 back loop half doubles, so there's 1, there's 2, into that middle stitch, which is our stitch marker stitch, an increase of 5, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch. Then into that following stitch, an increase of 2 back loop half doubles, so there's 1, there's 2, then 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last one. Now that we have just 1 stitch left, an increase of 3, so there's 1, there's 2, and there is 3. Now for this row, we should have a total of 31 stitches. Our following row is a slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch, making sure we're inserting our stitch marker into that same middle stitch. So we have just completed our back loop slip stitch row. From here, it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows until these 2 points that we have becomes the width of the neckline that we'd like. So I would suggest roughly from the edge of your collarbone all the way across to the edge of your other collarbone. Then I will meet you guys back right after a slip stitch row. We are back and my neckline is complete. Now I have a total of 16 rows. My height is roughly 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters, and my width is just about 9.5 or 24 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on our underarm portion. So first things first, it's going to be pretty much the same way that we did our 2 previous rows, but instead for the half double crochet rows, we are not going to be doing any increases along the outer edges, but the points are still going to remain the same. So since our following row is a half double crochet row, let's all start with a chain 2 and flip. From here, simply put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch till we have 1 stitch left right before our middle stitch marker stitch. We've made our way down till we have 1 stitch left right before our middle stitch marker stitch. So into that first stitch, we're still going to do an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. So there's 1, there's 2. Into our middle stitch marker stitch, still an increase of 5. And make sure we're inserting our stitch marker into that middle stitch. Then on the other side of our increase of 5, an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. Then to complete this row together, 1 back loop half double into every stitch. We are back and I have just completed my first underarm row. Now our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, but before we get started on that, we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the edges of that last row just so we know where the underarm starts and ends. Then our back loop slip stitch row is just a back loop slip stitch into every stitch, no increases, no decreases. Then continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until this edge right here can reach all the way over to mid underarm, making sure that we're placing these top corners right here where we'd like the depth of the neckline to be. Then once we have that, I will meet you guys back right after a slip stitch row so we can finish up with the length of our piece. We are back. I have just completed my underarm portion. I now have a total of 24 rows. My height is roughly 8 inches or 20 centimeters, or my underarm corner. Across to my other underarm corner is roughly 12 inches or 30 centimeters, but that is unstretched because it has a little bit of give to it. Now what we're going to do from here is just work on the length. So before we get started on the following row, we are going to want to insert our stitch marker into this last underarm row that we have, which is our side slip stitch row on both sides, just so we know where the underarm starts and ends on both sides. So from where we're at, chain 2 and flip. So doing our first decrease of 4 back loop half doubles, yarn over. Into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, second stitch's back loop, pull through, third, pull through, and fourth, pull through. We shall have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. So from here, yarn over, pull through all 6. Then from here, what we're going to do is 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Then our increases are going to be the same. So just to talk you guys through it, into the stitch right before our stitch marker stitch, an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. Into our stitch marker stitch, an increase of 5 with the stitch marker into that middle stitch. Then into that following stitch, an increase of 2. From there, continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 4 stitches. We made our way all the way down with our back loop half double crochet row, leaving our last 4 stitches. Now we're going to close off the row with a decrease of 4. So what we're going to do is yarn over. Into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, second, pull through, third, pull through, and fourth, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 6, and that's it. Our following row will not have any increases or decreases because it's a slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, and 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Then from here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat that back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases until the point that we have becomes the length of the top that we want. But we do want to make sure that we're placing our neckline where we want it to sit when the whole piece is completed. Now I'll meet you guys back once we get the total length of the piece that we want, right after back loop slip stitch row, then we'll fill in the sides and then we'll complete up our front panel together from there. I am back with the total height of my front panel. I have a total of 34 rows and this height is just about 11.5 inches or 29 centimeters. Now what we're going to do from here is just fill in these bottom corners. So what we're going to do is get started on our following half double crochet row. So chain 2 and flip. Start the following row with a decrease of 4 back loop halves, then 1 back loop half into every stitch till we have 2 stitches left right before our middle stitch. We are back at the end of our row. We all should have left 2 stitches right before our middle stitch marker stitch. Now we're all going to do a decrease of 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, and into that middle stitch marker stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 5. Then our following row is a back loop slip stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. We are back and our first 2 fill-in rows are complete. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until this comes down to a point and we'll end right after a half double crochet row. So all we're going to do is our back loop half double crochet that starts with a decrease of 4, 1 back loop half into every stitch, ending off the row with a decrease of 3. Then a slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Once we have this portion completed, I'll meet you guys back. So we are back. I have just completed filling in the bottom corner detail. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did here on the other side. Just a few quick tips. We did want to make sure that it came down to a point, but if your last row ends with just 1 or 2 stitches, that's completely fine as long as it comes to some sort of a point. Now what we're going to do from here, since this isn't reversible, is insert our hook into our middle stitch marker stitch within the back loop. And since we're starting along the bottom now, start with a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles, 1 back loop half into every stitch, then close off the row with a decrease of 4. So let's just do the first decrease together. Since we're into our stitch marker stitch, we're going to pull through and start with a chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch. Yarn over, and starting with that same stitch that our chain 2 is in, we're going to insert, pull through, next stitch is back loop, pull through, next stitch is back loop, pull through. Again, since we're starting along the bottom, we're only going to start with a decrease of 3. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. So yarn over, pull through all 5. Then 1 back loop half into every stitch, closing off the row with a decrease of 4. Then a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. Then just continue to repeat those 2 rows for the same amount of rows as our first fill-in section. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back. I have just completed the total width of my front panel. My total width is roughly 12 inches or 30 centimeters. Now we're going to single crochet along the edge. I've already done one side, so let's do the other side together. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, with the neckline faced away from us, we're going to start by inserting our hook into the bottom right corner of our front panel. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And all we're going to do is 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row until we're worked into the side row that's underneath our stitch marker stitch. So getting that started, my first side row, which everyone's first side row should be a side half double crochet row. So just find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. I am going to place my tail ends over my hook and single crochet around everything so that I don't have to weave in my ends later. But there's my first single into that same side row with my second single crochet. Now this is my next side slip stitch row. So find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Let's do this again. Into my next side row, which is a side half double for everyone, find that top loop and insert with 1. Same top loop with a second single crochet. Then my next side row is a side slip, so find that top loop and insert with 1 single. Now we're going to continue doing this until we're worked into our side row that we have that's right underneath our stitch marker stitch, then do a chain up 1 and cut. So I've just finished up the single crochet row along the right side of my front panel. Now we're going to repeat what we did here on the left side, but since we want to show the front of our single crochets, on the left side we're going to be inserting our hook into the stitch that's underneath this stitch marker stitch, chain 1, then continue to put 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip to reach the end of the row. We should have the same amount of stitches on both sides. Once we have both of them done, I will meet you back. So now that we have just completed single crocheting along the edges of our front panel, we can get started on the back panel. So what we're going to do for the back is start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for the single crochet row along the edge of our front panel. It should be the same on both sides, and for those of you that have my numbers, add a total of 44 stitches. So for my back panel, I'm going to make a chain of 44. Now I already have that portion of my back panel completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. But once when you have your chain, you're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with 1 half double crochet, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. Now we've made our way all the way down our chain, leaving 1 chain. Into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets, so there's 1 half double into that last chain, then a second half double into that same last chain. Then our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row, so simply chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of our back loop slip stitch row, again do another half double crochet row, but now all within the back loops. So this portion is basically going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. Put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. We've made our way down with our row 3, leaving that last stitch. Into that last stitch, another increase of 2 back loop half doubles. So into that same last stitch, into that back loop with 1, same back loop with a second. Now from here, we're all going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid-underarm so that it can align with the side of the base of our neck. And I'll meet you guys back right after a half double crochet row so we can get started on the shoulder together from there. Now, as you guys can see, I already have that portion all completed. So just to let you guys know, my underarm portion, I have a total of 13 rows. That width is roughly 3 inches or 8 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, since we all should have ended along the top, we're all going to make a chain that reaches the top of our shoulder, making sure that this tail end still stays 1 inch underneath our underarm because we don't want our armhole to get too big or too small. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain of 21, that's roughly 4 inches or 8 centimeters. Now just using my sample size as an example, once we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Once we have that chain 1, we're going to slip stitch into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook. So bring your hook down, 1 slip stitch into every chain, then once we reach the body, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Once when that row is completed, from there all we're going to do is back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the width of the base of our neck. Once we have that completed, I will meet you back right after a back loop slip stitch row, so along the bottom, then we can finish up with our underarm together from there. So when the width of our back panel is completed, which by the way, I have a total of 32 rows, this width is roughly 7 inches or 18 centimeters unstretched, we can now get started on our second underarm portion. So what we're all going to want to do is insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led all the way up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 21. So on this side from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 21st stitch. Then, since we should all be along the bottom, put one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving 2 stitches right before a stitch marker. So we've made our way up with our back loop half double crochet row, leaving the last 2 stitches. Then all we're going to do is just a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles. So into that second to last stitch's back loop, pull through, into that last stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through 4. Then our following row is a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, so chain 1, flip our work and put one back loop slip into every stitch. Then from here it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, so just a back loop half double that ends on a decrease of 2, and a back loop slip with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of underarm rows that we have at the beginning of our back panel. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up 1 and cut, then I will meet you back. We are back. The entirety of my back panel is complete. Now my total width is roughly 10 inches or 25 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to seam up our sides. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the ribbing that we have for both the front and the back panel is faced along the outsides. Then we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row, but just as a really quick tip, the edge of the front panel may be a little bit taller than the edge of the back panel, kind of like how mine is right here. As long as you have the same amount of stitches on both sides, you'll be completely fine. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch. Now to do our outside loop slip stitch seam, we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over and gently pull through all 3 loops. Let's do this once more. Into the next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3 and continue doing this, making our way all the way up. When we don't have any more stitches left, do a chain up 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. Everything is all seamed up. Now the next thing we're going to do is our underarm portion. So we're all going to need to do a single crochet prep row before we get started on our underarm detail. So what we're all going to want to do is take a look at the front panel, making sure that our work is flipped right side out. Then start by inserting our hook into our stitch marker side row, and we're going to be working down towards the back panel and all the way up towards this top corner stitch. So all we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row. So getting this started, we're going to pull through and start with a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to secure. Then into that first side row, which is a side half double, insert with 2 single crochets. There's 1 into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Now this is my next side row, which is a side slip stitch row. Find that top loop and insert with just 1. Then just do the next set of rows again. My next side row is a side half. So find that top loop and insert with 2. There's 1. And there's 2. Into my next side row is a side slip, so find that top loop and insert with just 1. We are going to continue working our way all the way down our underarm, then back up our back panel's underarm until we reach this top corner stitch within the back panel, and then I'll meet you back. We've just completed our single crochet row. Now that we're at the top corner stitch of our back panel, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the underarm detail to be. I'd suggest roughly about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I went ahead and made a chain 5. Now we're going to slip stitch all the way down our chain. Start by blocking off that chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now once we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're going to be working down our single crochet row. So what we're going to do is connect it into that next available stitch into the base. So this is my next stitch into the base. We're going to insert with a slip stitch to connect. That slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We're at the end of our row 3. Now what we're going to do from here is slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base, again like how we did our row 1. So finding that next stitch, insert with a slip stitch, that doesn't count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work and one back loop slip into every stitch again. Continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we're worked into our last available stitch for our underarm detail, and then I will meet you guys back. So I've just completed my back loop slip stitch rows. Now from here we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, but we do want to show the front of the single crochet. So just making sure that we're looking at the back first, insert your hook into the top corner stitch of the back panel, do the single crochet row until we reach our stitch marker stitch within the front panel, then make the same chain and do our back loop slip stitch rows again. Then I'll meet you guys back when we have this completed. So we are back. We have just completed our underarm detail on both sides. Now we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, we're all going to want to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of the back panel. Then we're going to make a chain that reaches all the way up and over our shoulder to this front panel's underarm detail corner stitch. Now when we're making this chain, we do want to make sure that we're leaving enough space so that this isn't too tight. But once we have that, we're going to just single crochet all the way across and around. So I went ahead and already made my chain. I needed roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters, so I made a chain of 25. Then all we're going to do, making sure that our chain isn't twisted, is single crochet it into this top corner stitch of our underarm detail. Now this counts as a connection and as our first single crochet, and all we're going to do from here is 1 single crochet into every stitch, 2 single crochet into every side half, 1 single crochet into every side slip, making our way all the way across the front of our neckline. Then once we reach the corner stitch of this underarm detail, make the same chain that we made here. Then single crochet across the top of our back panel. Same rules apply as the front. Once we made our way all the way around, I will meet you back. So now that our first row is completed, we're going to be doing 1 more single crochet row just to sturdy everything up. So from where we're at, put 1 single crochet into every chain and stitch, making our way all the way up and around again. Then I'll meet you back. We are back. We have just completed our single crochet row. Now from here, we're going to repeat our underarm portion, making our way all the way around. So what we're going to do is start by making a chain the length that we'd like for our collar to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 6. Then just repeat my back loop slip stitch rows all the way back and around. We are back. We made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows for the collar, and we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is seam it up, and as you guys can see, I have already done that. And this is going to be the same seam as the sides. So just to talk you guys through it, making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to do our same outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain of 1 and cut. Then our piece is completed. Then the last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. There you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!